And now I can't wait to present to you Karolina Kotorowicz Jasińska. She's going to speak about new school reality and what not to flip to design lessons smartly. So please, Karolina, and all of you, attendees, enjoy.
Hello, everyone. Let me just, okay, and here it is. Perfect. Hello. As Ignas has said, my name is Karolina, and I'm going to talk to you about, well, designing and planning lessons in these difficult times of online teaching, of online education. My aim for the next 50, I'm looking at my watch, 50 or 55 minutes, is to equip you with the materials so that you're able to plan the lessons in such a way that it requires less rather than more effort. I believe that one of the biggest problems, or one of the biggest complaints from all the teachers that I work with, and I work, maybe this is something that I should mention at this point. I work as a director of studies. I work with teachers to maximize their potential. I observe their classes. I kind of advise them how to, tweak their teaching techniques to help their students develop linguistically even better. So basically, if not all of the things you're going to hear about right now, or at most of the things maybe, if not all of them, are based on these observations, and are mainly based on my experience as a director of studies. So what I observed at the very beginning of this lockdown and the very beginning of online education is that apart from the fact that we actually stayed at home, the workload actually doubled, right? Staying at home, not having to go to work and then come home, did not actually mean that we had more time at our hands. It meant just the opposite. It was a never-ending it seemed to be a never-ending work, okay? I am going to tell you a few things about why that happened, a few most common mistakes that my teachers and the group, the teachers that I work with, I call them my teachers. So I'd like to explain that at the very beginning in case it sounds weird. So I'm going to share them with you the most common mistakes that my teachers make or made at the very beginning, or during the first lockdown and the first wave of online teaching and online education. And like I said at the beginning, my aim for the next hour is to provide you with sufficient measures to make knowledgeable choices and reasonable decisions as to how to design your lessons, how to plan your online teaching so that it does not amount to extra effort, okay? Or it doesn't, so that it doesn't add up to the effort that you have to put into online education. One thing that I'd like to, so what I'm really going to talk about is not so much of distance learning, but distance teaching. And I am perfectly aware of the fact that, at the end of the day, it is the student who is the most important part, or should, in the process of linguistic development. But today, I'm not going to really focus on the student. I'm not going to focus on the process of developing different skills of language subsystems. I am going to focus directly on the teacher and what he or she could or do to make his or her work at least a little bit easier. So the agenda is the following. I will start with some introduction in which, yes, I am going to tell you about some of the basic mistakes or most common mistakes that my teachers used to make at the very beginning of online education. Based on those mistakes, so bearing them in mind, I will try to come up with some basic principles of distance teaching. So something that, whichever course book you teach with, whichever age group you really teach with, there is a certain list of principles that I believe if you follow them, your work will be slightly easier, I think, right? Then I'm going to talk about 2 scenarios for distance learning, and I am going to discuss something that I called a guide. I called it here a guide to success, or a guide to online teaching based on Gateway. And this guide is actually quite an extensive handout that you're going to receive after, I'm not sure if it's after my presentation or really after the conference today. And during this presentation, I will also explain how this guide works, what you can see there, how to adjust it to your own needs. So let us start with a short introduction. Basically, when people think, I mean, outside the schoolwork, or maybe in the past when, you know, perhaps even some of you did online courses, okay? But or at least some of us have heard about people who do online courses. And basically this was the idea. You know, a teacher explaining something, everything working nicely and smoothly. But in fact, once it all started, when it all started, it gave rise to a lot of frustration. Not only for the learners, not only, sorry, for the teachers, but also for the learners. One of the reasons for this was the fact that, and that was one common thing that all of my teachers unfortunately did, was that they simply gave students too much work to do. So first, they kind of spent too much time preparing all sorts of extra things, looking for worksheets online, and then gave lots of extra worksheets and extra activities to their students, which basically ended up on, which basically meant frustration on both sides of this coin, okay, of the teaching learning process. So the beginnings, I would say, were pretty tough. I also have to say that the way my teachers and the way we work nowadays is completely different. But still, I'd like to say what those initial mistakes were. First of all, and look, mind you that they all kind of, they constitute, all of these constitute one big problem, and could be divided into, this one big problem can be divided into smaller ones. The one big problem is that for some reason, teachers, when they move to online teaching or online educations, if not most of the teachers, at least some of them, and definitely the ones that I work with, forgot about the course book, or for some reason minimized the role of the course book in online education. So this basically resulted in too many extra worksheets, because instead of relying on the course book and, you know, still teaching the same course, they were still teaching the same course, but for some reason they were looking for extra materials, extra worksheets, also too much reliance on online materials, pictures, online applications, videos, more applications, online games. This was, if not completely redundant, then it definitely added up to the workload of the teacher and later on the workload of the learner. And finally, let me just, okay. And finally, they didn't rely enough on the course book material, okay? Let me now digress for a moment for where I believe the reason for all these problems was. At some point I found, it was like an online blog of a teacher or a director of studies, and one of the headlines on that blog was the following: How am I supposed to impress my students in online education? I was like, hold on a second. Why do you think, or why should anybody think, that my job as a teacher is to impress my students? The article in the blog was all about, you know, how am I supposed to impress my students in online teaching if they actually know more about, they are more technologically advanced, they are more computer literate, they know more applications, they are generally better at, you know, using the internet and finding things online. But the question is, is your job as a teacher really to impress the students? Or is your job to actually teach them? Okay, it doesn't mean that we need to bore them to death by doing one exercise after another, and I'm going to talk about how to avoid that. But it doesn't mean that you have to wow your students. It doesn't mean that every online lesson has to have this wow effect, okay? So basically, you don't need all sorts of extra application, online resources, extra worksheets, additional videos and whatnot. What we really need to do is to approach what we already have, but in such a way that it does not bore our students to death. I mean, there's one thing we need to understand, that being in the classroom learning or going to school provides variety. There is always some kind of group dynamics. There's a break. Things are going on. When the student sits in front of the computer for several hours in a row, there is very little variety. So, but I am going to tell you how to provide students with that variety, not necessarily by telling them to do Kahoot or play Quizlet or whatnot. Okay, so with some very basic, easily accessible materials. Okay, so here we are. So basically, my ideas for today will be that in online education, we still stick to the course book. What has to be done, however, is that we need to be selective. Okay, for example, I've just told you that doing one exercise after another in the student's book, then in the workbook, is going to be downright boring. Okay, very repetitive. So let's be selective. Let's decide which of these activities should be done and which of them perhaps should be omitted. Okay, now how to decide in a conscious and knowledgeable way what to do and what to omit is one of those tools that I'd like to equip you with today, so that at the end of this session, you can make such choices on your own. And now if you must add, then add something simple. It doesn't have to be like a game in Kahoot or an extra set of words in Quizlet or maybe another online application. It can be something very simple. If you teach with Gateway, and I am going to give you examples of all the things that the methodological thing that I talk about today. So I'm going to exemplify them with Gateway. So now if you teach with that course book, I would say that the teacher's book is a perfect source for such simple activities to be added to online education. Let's have a look at the just one of many examples. Ask students to write the names of 3 famous people who annoy them and say why using vocabulary from the first, or say why using vocabulary from the first lesson and adverbs of frequency. Okay, so clearly there's an extra activity. Students no longer look down and do one activity after another in the book, but they are allowed to interact, to do something, facing the teachers and their peers. Okay, another one, hold a team competition, which is possible because you can divide the students that you see in either Zoom or Teams or Google Classroom into 2 groups. Divide the class into 2 teams and read out definitions of the words from the text. As soon as someone knows the word which you're explaining, they call out the word or raise their hand. And that team gets a point, obviously, if they are able to say what this is, okay? So easily, just with a minor modification, this is a very nice online activity which kind of holds interaction, which puts people together. And at some point today, I will make a claim that if you're thinking what is more important to be done during the online lesson, like a set of activities in the course book or in the workbook, or some kind of interaction or group work or pair work, we should definitely go for the second one. Let me give you some other example. This example in the green square actually comes from the guide that you're going to receive. It is also the same rule. So add something simple. You don't need to spend hours looking for extra materials online or preparing extra worksheets. Look at this one. revise phrases and vocabulary from the previous lesson. In order to do so, you might ask students to write 4 or 5 items they can remember in the chat box. Very simple. Show students a photo, which you prepared before the lesson, and ask students to write a mini dialogue based on this photo using the target vocabulary, or show students 3 to 4 sentences in L1 and ask for translation, which is also a very nice revision activity without the extra effort of preparing something, of preparing extra worksheets or looking for online materials, okay? So this was a short introduction, which I hope already gives you an idea of where we are going with this, or where this should go. So now, based on those mistakes, based on those very general guidelines, let us come up with some basic principles of online learning or distance teaching. Let me just look at the watch. Okay. Number 1, and this actually follows up on being selective. One thing we should remember is that not every task needs to be done. And I think that at the beginning of the first lockdown, the first wave of online, the first part of online teaching, this was the biggest problem for my teachers. If there was one page of activities in the workbook, in the student's book, and another page of activities in the workbook, for some reason, they believe that all of those had to be done, okay? Either during online lesson, which very often turned into online supervision, students were doing the task, and the teacher was just, supervising online. Whatever they didn't do during the lesson, that was their homework, okay? But not every task needs to be done. We have to prioritize. How do we prioritize? By setting lesson goals. If you know what your goal is, then you will be able to pick and choose the right activities for your learners. How do you pick the right activities for your learners? Well, I cannot answer that question for you, because the biggest asset of any teacher is the fact that they know their students. So let me have a look at this. Let me show you this. This is an introductory lesson in a unit. It introduces vocabulary into lexical sets. The first one is art, theatre, and music, and then artists. And now, it would be difficult for me to choose something for your students, right? But for my students, I can make these choices. First of all, I can decide whether I want to focus on presentation or practice, because let's face it, there are 7 activities on this page. We are not going to do all of them, okay? So perhaps I will focus on the activities that present the new vocabulary, which is exercise number 1 and 2 here, and exercise number 4 here, and that's all, okay? And I can decide that because perhaps I'm more interested in giving students time to do these activities in art from the lexical field of art, theatre, and music, because the name of artist is actually something that we already discussed a while ago, while we discussed, I don't know, the jobs, okay, or people who do different activities, so, right? Or maybe I'm going to decide on different vocabulary sets. Maybe I'll say, okay, art, theatre, music is actually something pretty easy, and that's not that important from the point of view of the exam or the test that they are going to write at the end of the semester or the school year. What is really important for me is this exercise. Why? Because this is actually word building, and word building is something that my students have problems with, okay? But this is something for me to decide based on what my students' needs are, what the curriculum requirements are, what the test requirements are, and so on. So setting goals is vital before every session, before every lesson. Another very important thing, homework is not obligatory. Mind you that in online teaching, everything is homework, okay? So a follow-up, a reasonable follow-up after the online lesson might be a good idea, but not giving students homework should always be at the back of the teacher's mind. There is always a possibility not to give students homework, just because this is what being learner-friendly means. Because all of our students, and you just have to trust me on that one, they are super tired, they are exhausted, they are struggling on a daily basis. So if we forgo homework once in a while or every other lesson, it's fine. Another thing that I would say works well for, or is like one of the basic principles for distance learning, is that it's very easy to boost students' creativity and to help students develop linguistically by using students' surroundings. Look, this is a complete novelty. I mean, one thing is for sure, students develop linguistically, or they learn the language, both vocabulary and grammar, by putting things that they learn into context. And now this online teaching and online learning creates a completely new situation for us, right? That basically means that we can use the students' personal surroundings and, you know, personal lives, the way they are, the way they function in their private lives, as a tool for developing lexis and grammar. So, for example, the instructions for students might be the following, and it is also taken from the guide you're going to receive after the session. Take a photo of something in your surroundings, your room, your house, parents, personal items, etc. Write 4 to 5 sentences about this photo with the grammar structure from the lesson. And again, it does not require much effort from the teacher. You don't need to make an extra worksheet, okay? This is a very, this is something that you would not normally be able to do in the classroom. Speaking of being learner-friendly, I remember the beginnings of online education that was in Poland, and suddenly all the teachers were like, how am I going to give them tests? How am I going to do the quizzes? What if I give my students the test? They turn off their cameras and they start cheating, or they start writing, from one another, or they start, I don't know, texting each other for the right answers. And I'm like, so what will happen if they write a test together? The aim of the test is not really to prove students how little they know, but just to give them yet another opportunity to revise, isn't it? So if my students pair up or group in order to write my test, it's fine for me. I'm the kind of a teacher who likes giving very good marks. So maybe it's just me, but this is one of the, okay, how about this? How about just giving students a test to write at home without any supervision, without any online supervision? I used to do it still when I was, when I was teaching in a regular school, going to the classroom. Instead of doing tests in the school, I used to give my students tests to do at home. There was just one rule: they cannot ask other people. They can use the book, they can use the course book, right? So what? They would still get, not everybody would get a 5, right? They were 4s and 5s, so which is the second and the third best mark in Polish, on the Polish scale. But I don't mind that, right? And in such difficult times of lockdown, of pandemic, or online education, I think that it's even more important for assessment to be friendly. I'll show you some examples of how to make this assessment learner friendly. And finally, something that I believe online education gives room for is that we can finally acknowledge what students want. In other words, in the classroom, when you manage 20 or 30 people at the same time, it's difficult to tell students, okay, now do 3 activities of your own choice from this page, because later on, classroom management would fail completely. But in online education, that will actually work. And let me show you how it works. Again, the example is from, that's a revision page from Gateway. Students are supposed to revise reported speech, statements and questions, and vocabulary. The instruction for students goes, do 3 tasks of your choice on exercise 107. You don't need to do all of them. Perhaps some of the students will do the easiest ones, because this is their nature as students. They want to do what's the easiest. But perhaps another person who is more ambitious and knows where where he or she struggles, he will choose to do what he used to have, or what he had problems with on this page. We can also add instructions for students could be do 3 tasks of your choice on page 107. Make sure you mix grammar and vocabulary activities, for instance, to make sure that students do kind of revise a little bit of grammar and a little bit of vocabulary. But that's okay. We are working and we are teaching in completely new times. Giving students a choice is fine for me. And the last exercise the last principle for distance teaching is something that I've heard at my son's school when we were preparing as parents for online education. One of the teachers in that school said, remember, doing a task is not learning. If you ask students to do 7 activities on the page from the student's book, and another 6 activities from the workbook, it still doesn't mean that they have learned anything, okay? It's better to narrow down the number of activities to 3, but make sure that students actually think, do something extra than just ticking. Use those new words and structures in context. And I'm going to show you in a moment how that actually works. And I am going to show you how these principles work in 2 different scenarios for distance teaching. Distance learning, distance teaching, like I said, everything, everywhere here in my presentation, you will only find distance teaching because, like I said, I'm talking about teachers today, and the teachers, so to speak, well-being to a certain extent. Now, there are 2 options which you are probably familiar with. The first one is called asynchronous, which means that there are no video connections. What you do is just send the instructions for individual study. And right now that we have developed different methods and techniques, and now that we have got used to online teaching, I believe that asynchronous teaching is not so popular anymore. It was, however, at the beginning of online learning. So I'm pretty sure that if not all of you, then most of you actually teach in that synchronous way, with real-time lessons when students just log into Zoom, Classroom, Google Classroom, Microsoft Teams, or whichever tool you have. And this is followed by some online, so these online sessions are followed by individual work. There is, however, one area where the asynchronous learning has got a lot of potential. I would say that there are still a number of, maybe rural areas, maybe underprivileged families in which there are 3 kids and only 1 computer. In cases like this, I would say for such students, asynchronous learning is basically the only way they can do any schoolwork. Okay, so that's why although I am aware of the fact that most of us are now working in this synchronous way, I still decided to include that asynchronous option because, well, life writes different scenarios for us. You never know what kind of students you're going to have in the nearest future. Let us start with the first one then, asynchronous learning. How to go about it? 3 most important things is, first of all, pick and choose. It's absolutely impossible to do everything. And that's for sure. So being selective, choosing the activities for our learners, setting the lesson goals, okay? We should focus on the core. If I decide that my aim for this particular lesson is to introduce present simple, then let me choose these activities or those activities from the book that are my core. That means the activities that actually introduce present simple, for instance. And basically, asynchronous learning is all about writing such instructions for the learner that will navigate them through the course book material. Let me show you how it works on the basis of a course book. Again, we've got Gateway, the first introductory lesson here. Now, how do we do that? First of all, prioritize, right? We need to decide what is it that we want our students to do. Even if it's not for online education, we cannot just, or we shouldn't write to our learners, do activities from page 107 in the student's book and page 55 in the workbook, that's all, okay? Because it's, like I said before, it's downright boring. There is no variety. Students feel, I would say that this gives students the feeling of being left alone completely, okay? So we still need to prioritize and focus on something. So again, you can either choose the presentation activities, and let's have a look here. For instance, parents work with a partner, students cannot work with a partner, but put these words in the correct column, okay. So this is something that I would do. And I would also ask them to do exercise 4 and 5, right? And then at the end, just to provide some variety, I would add one of the activities which relies on more than just ticking and crossing and matching. So this is what I would choose. I would choose one listening, right? Go beyond doing a task. If you must add something extra. Maybe you can ask students a question about the photographs and include an element of choice. So maybe if you tell your students to do exercises 1, 4, and 5 from this page, then you can add and maybe choose one of the listening activities from this page. If students just want to listen, check, and repeat, they will listen to the recording to exercise 2. If they want more, they will listen to the recording to exercise 6. And now, how is this done in the Gateway Guide for Distance Learning? In the first option, asynchronous learning. Let me first maybe digress here or introduce this handout to you, something that you will receive. Basically, the guide is nothing else but a bunch of generic instructions that in this asynchronous option can be sent out to your students. Due to the fact that Gateway is organized in every unit in Gateway is organized in the same or according to the same language systems and skills, I was able to provide you with a template for each of these lessons. So there's a template for vocabulary lesson. There is another template for reading lesson and grammar and context and developing vocabulary and so on. And first, I'd like to show you how this template works for asynchronous learning. So in asynchronous learning, that is the one that you only send instructions to your learners, comes in the following way. Lesson aim, to introduce new vocabulary. This is obviously something that I've done for you. This usually in every lesson scenario, every lesson plan, you do write the lesson aim. However, what comes under it, the obligatory tasks this is something that you might already think about and change. I wrote here all tasks from the student's book, introducing new vocabulary, some of the vocabulary presentation. But maybe this is a moment when you could think about your students. In other words, the obligatory task is the minimum core, right? The minimum core that every student should do. And then your task is to you receive a template, and it says as follows: send the following instruction to your students. This is an instruction to you. Remember to complete the pages and the number of the task, which are all marked in red lines. So, and here what you send to the students comes here from this moment, what to prepare before the lesson. So prepare students' book, workbook, and notebook. And here comes the list of instructions. What do I do and where to find it? Number 1, look at the photos on page something. You can, because this is, like I said, for every single vocabulary lesson in the book. Can you name at least 5 items you can see in these pictures? Do tasks this and this and that on page something. This is for you to be filled in before you send them to the teachers. Now, exercise 1 and then exercise 3, mind you, provide some kind of deviation from the, doing one task after another, because just doing the activities in the book is not learning. So I suggested the following: create a mind map for the new words, or write the new words in the notebook. Then I added something else. Listen to the activity, do the listening activity number something on page. This also gives you the recording. And then do 3 tasks of your choice on page something in the workbook, right? So mind you, all of the principles for online teaching are actually there. There is element of choice. We do talk about, you know, what's the, we focus on the core. We do think about the lesson. Now, let me show you some other principles, how they work in this particular guide. Let students choose and make use of the students' surroundings. This is a grammar in context lesson. I'm not sure how many of you actually use Gateway, but look at this. Now there's present simple and present continuous, 2 activities. And then you go to grammar reference. So these are for grammar presentation and then grammar practice. Now then number 3 is again grammar presentation with grammar reference on a different page, and then again grammar practice. So how to let students choose and make the use of the surroundings? Here you are. Again, the lesson name is grammar presentation and practice, obligatory task, the grammar presentation activity, grammar reference. This is again for you to revise. Perhaps you would like to include something else here, but this is, mind you, it's just for you. You don't really send it to the learner. What you send to the learner starts here, what to prepare before the lesson, and then what do I do? Do tasks 1A, 2A, 3A, and so on. So the grammar presentation activities. Then go to grammar reference on page something. Then do tasks, and which tasks should be done. If necessary, go to grammar reference again, because this is where you find more explanation. And again, do 3 tasks of your choice. Do 3 tasks of your choice in the workbook. Now, and again, what comes here is the idea for assessment. It's the one that, that I already quoted today. Take a photo of something in your surroundings, your room, house, parents, personal items, etc. It should be etc. Sorry, misspelled word, sorry. Write 4 to 5 sentences about this photo with the grammar structure from the lesson. And send the sentences to me by, I don't know, Friday the 20th at the latest. This is the instruction for students, just, right? And this is idea for assessment. It doesn't have to be a test. It's enough for the learner to do something, I would say, so that he or she presents something that, you know, something that they did well. They can choose. Okay, this is something. Sorry, I lost track here. What I wanted to say is that with an activity like this, the assessment becomes learner friendly because we give students other opportunities to show the results of the learning other than a test or a quiz. This is what I wanted to say. Sorry. Okay, more examples. The next the next activity, the next example is a page with developing speaking. Right now, some of our principles were add something simple, make assessment learner friendly. So, at the same, look, obligatory task, lesson names. Look here. First, students do task this and this on page, but then read the phrases in the speaking bank, choose 3 and write sentences with them, right? This is adding something small and something simple. You don't need a whole worksheet or extra activities, extra online app. This is something, because it's short, it's manageable, it's doable for every learner. And learner-friendly assessment, look at this one, write a dialogue similar to the one from the lesson, using at least 3 phrases from the speaking bank, and send it to me by Wednesday, the 22nd, or Wednesday will be the 25th at the latest. Okay, so again, it doesn't have to be a test or a quiz. Oh Jesus, I need to speed up now. I've just noticed how late it is. Okay then, so let us move on to the next part. So in synchronous learning, or the guide for synchronous learning, is simply a set of instructions that you send out to the learner. This is a generic template, which you only filled in with the number of pages. Obviously, naturally, this has been created for Gateway. You might, however, use it, and I hope it will be, I've done something similar with other course books as well with other titles. And I think that once you get to know the principle, once you kind of go through this process with me and understand how this works, I think you will be able to create something similar for another book or another course book that you're using with your students. Now, let us have a look at the synchronous learning and the guide for synchronous distance learning or distance teaching. Like I said, these are real-time lessons followed by some individual study. Again, how to go about it? First of all, and this is something that I believe I've already mentioned, we need to avoid online supervision. An online lesson is not the moment when students do activities and you only watch if they're actually doing it, okay? Online lessons should be collaborative or as collaborative and as interactional as possible, because this is doing the activities in the student's book or in the workbook is something that students can do on their own. If you have them, if they suddenly, tune in or log in to one, chat room together, this is the moment to talk, to interact, okay, to do something different, something that they are unfortunately deprived of because of the online teaching. And in order for this to work, we again need to flip some of the tasks. Now, this is where the idea of flipped classroom comes to light. Now, one of the most convincing explanations that I've heard of how flipped classroom actually adds up to the effectiveness of any teaching, but also online teaching, is the one provided by Russell Stannard. And let me briefly explain it to you. These are his ideas, but I believe that they are very informative and they are pretty much very simple, but truly eye-opening. In order to understand the idea, or in order to understand what flipped classroom actually is, we need to go back to the Bloom's taxonomy of different thinking skills. I'm pretty sure that you are familiar with the concept that some of the thinking skills are the so-called lower order, which are rather, manipulative, repetitive. They are based on kind of absorbing or getting to know certain facts, like remembering, understanding, applying. Then on top of that are higher order thinking skills. So the activities, all of the activities that actually make you think, that make you interact with others, create, analyze different sources, they definitely require a lot more processing from the learner, okay? And now, mind you, what happens in the regular classroom, let's take history, for example, right? First, the teacher gives a lecture on, I don't know, the beginnings of the Second World War, giving all the dates and telling a story, right? So, and these are lower order thinking skills. It's all about understanding, remembering the dates and so on. And then students go home and they have to do something with it. Yes, like create a mind map of different reasons for the outbreak of the Second World War, or create a timeline, or analyze some reasons for different events, and so on. And this, so in other words, at home, they are left with a higher order thinking skills. Now, the idea for flipped classroom is to change that. So actually understanding, so in other words, pure facts, and just reading about something is, what students can do at home. And now when you come to the classroom, let's analyze, evaluate, create something. And the same thing will be, the same principle will be applicable in online learning. Remembering, understanding, and maybe even applying, but definitely remembering, understanding is something that students can do before the lesson. So if you have a vocabulary presentation activity, students can do it before the lesson. So they can only look for the words in the dictionary. They can read the rules about how present perfect is made, okay? And then when they come to the classroom, or when they log on to your online session, you will analyze and evaluate and use these new vocabulary and structures in context, okay? Talk about various concepts, share your ideas. This is the idea of a flipped classroom. So again, Let us have a look on the basis of particular examples at on how it's going to work in our online education based on Gateway again. So one more time, the first lesson, vocabulary, the first lesson in a unit, this is what I mean. The first lesson in a unit, vocabulary, 2 vocabulary sets. Now, the question now will be, what is it that I ask students to do before the lesson? And what is it that I leave for the online session? If we follow the flipped classroom ideas, so anything that is suitable for self-study can be lesson preparation, and anything that requires interaction and communication will be done during the online session. So maybe look at this one, exercises 1, 4, and 5. This is something that students can do before the lesson, and there's no need for you to sit down online and supervise them doing these particular activities. Now, when they come to the classroom or when log into your online lesson, they are already equipped with a little bit of language. And now you can ask them to listen, to talk about the photographs, listen to people talking about themselves, do some speaking activity, and so on and so forth. Right? Okay. So here, what will be, this is something that I'd like to share with you, this inventory of before the lesson activities. What else can you ask students to do before the lesson? Any warm-up activities from the course book? Vocabulary and grammar presentation, that's what it looks like in Gateway. If the grammar lesson begins with matching the rules with the examples and reading bits and pieces of grammar reference, so just the grammar explanations, they can do it on their own before the lesson. You can ask students to read or listen to a text or a recording for global understanding. So without focusing on the details, but just read it once to have any idea of what the text is about, or just listen to the recording and be able to tell me what it is about without really doing the activity from the course book. Just listen, okay? You can give students some jumbled sentences that, as a preparation for this particular lesson, they are supposed to put in the correct order or unjumble, okay? You can even give students the vocabulary list in their mother tongue, so that for them to look for English equivalents. Okay, something very simple, something that belongs to the lower order thinking skills. You can also focus on the special boxes, like read the comprehension tip and think about if you actually do it, if you ever do it. Read the exam tip, read the phrases bank before the lesson. Right, something simpler, but something that students can easily do through self-study. So let me show you now what this, obviously all of these principles, all of these types of activities are included in the guide that you're going to receive as a handout after my session. It is kind of similar because, when you start, you still have the same lesson aim. You've got the obligatory tasks. However, it starts with online lesson scenario. So it actually gives you it's a list of suggestions for the teacher, how you can do, what you can do during the lesson. Let's take a very brief look. Greet the students, ask them to show if they can hear you or see you. So if you hear me, put your thumbs up or nod your head or put your arms in the air and so on, okay? Anything that, allows you to connect to the learners. Begin the lesson with a short warm-up activity, asking students, today I'd like to go somewhere. I want to have something. Draw your students' attention to the photos and ask questions, right? Ask them to look at the photos. And in the picture, so that you actually have some kind of interaction, okay? Then number 4 is ask students if they have done the activity from the student's book you assigned for self-study, obviously. Then choose 2 or 3 activities from the student's book, and it follows like this. Before the lesson, extra activity, for example. Before the lesson, prepare a few photos connected with the subject of the lesson, right? You don't really need to prepare extra worksheets, look for online applications or online games. Just prepare 2 or 3 photographs that you show to your students, and you ask them to write 2 or 3 sentences describing the photographs. As simple as that. It kind of, in the classroom, we do divide the activities with the heads down and heads up. So anything that requires the heads up or any kind of collaboration, okay? Shh, I'm sorry, but I'm experiencing some sounds in here in my room, and okay. Okay. And then what follows after that is the instructions for self-study. So we still have the opportunity to send something to our learners. What you need to prepare before the lesson is student book, workbook, and again, do task this and this on page, do 3 tasks of your choice. So the same principle of allowing students to choose, but there's one extra element. Before the next online session, do something, okay? And it's again for you to decide what you will need. Another example, and I promise I'm finishing, I'm kind of moving towards the end right now. So I just need like 3 to 4 minutes more. Now we've got this reading lesson. Again, you have to ask yourselves a question. What is it that I want my students to prefer, the text or the language? If it's the text, maybe we ask them to do exercises 1 and 2. Look at the photos in the article and describe what you can see. It's enough for students to think about it before the lesson and read the article to check their ideas. You can ask students to focus on special boxes like the critical thinking, and think and compare the ideas. Students can actually prepare or even take notes on what they're going to say. The exam success, you're going to do a true or false exercise. What do you think is a good procedure? Do you do it? And so on. Okay, so something that prepares students for what they're going to do in the lesson. So here, look, before the next online session, you have this is what I've chosen here. Read the text on page something, be able to say what it is about in your L1. So it's enough to read it for general understanding. And so that, look what happens then in the online lesson scenario. You greet the students, you say, you ask students, say 2 or 3 sentences or write them in the chat box using the vocabulary from the previous lesson so that we revise the material from previous lessons. We've got check the activity from the reading lesson. You ask them to do as a preparation, which is the one you can see here on the top of the slide, and the lesson scenario continues in the same way. Now, other elements that I'd like to draw your attention to, again, the rules in this synchronous teaching guide is the same. So we've got different activities for different ideas for assessment, for friendly assessment. This one is actually pretty good. Look at it. Take a photo of 2 activities that you have completed and send it to me by next Friday, and you introduce the date. Mind you that the student here, it's not only you show them that they will be evaluated in a different way than just a test or a quiz, but you allow them to show it to you what they are really good at, okay? What is it that you want me to assess you? Which part of your work do you think is the best? How do you want to be assessed? So this is extremely learner-friendly, I would say. And then before the next lesson, look what happens. Watch the flipped classroom video, do some tasks on page this and that, and then read grammar reference. And if you're using Gateway, and again, I don't know how many of you actually do, all the grammar in context lesson, or most of them are supplemented with flipped classroom grammar presentation video, right? Which is absolutely great for students to watch before the lesson. And then the rules will be the same. Make use of students' surroundings, engage students in interaction, and focus on the exam. So we can ask students to read this text, refer them to page 145. Also, this might be done before the lesson, right? What I'm trying to show you is that there are plenty of minor things in this course book, and perhaps there are also in the course book that you're using, if it's not this one, that are huge potential for online classes, that you don't need to do one exercise after another from the book, from the student's book, and from the course book. Or from the workbook. And again, grammar in context starts with the following: greet your students, revise structures, ask students how well they understood grammar explanations they were supposed to read, choose 3 or 2 activities, and important number 5, ask your students to write 2 sentences with the new structure, with information about lives, hobbies, and so on, which they would like to other students to know. We might change this one into it's somewhere there in one of the lessons in the guide. We might change this one into a game, write one sentence that is true and 1 sentence that is false. Students read it out, and the other students have to guess if it's actually true or not, okay? So again, this is the lesson. After the lesson, you send the students the instructions for self-study, and this continues like this in exactly the same way. So just one sentence of summary. I hope that things, like I said, you will receive both guidelines or both guides, the gateway guides to both synchronous and asynchronous teaching. If, however, you don't teach with gateway, I really hope that what I've just helped you out with is to make conscious and knowledgeable choices, make good selections, and be able to prepare lessons effectively but effortlessly. Okay, be able to pick and choose what's good for my students from any course book that you actually use. And good luck with that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karolina. It was a very interesting presentation and useful as well. Right, we gathered quite a lot of questions, which we are going to ask in the Q&A session. Yes. Okay, so thank you again. And
thank you. I'll see you at the Q&A session, yeah?
Yeah, see you.
See you, bye.
Bye-bye.